Hello, Year 10. Well, it's taken me a bit of a while, but hopefully, fingers crossed, I've found a way for me to make these little videos for you to hopefully guide you through a couple of poems that we need to look at over the next couple of weeks. Like you, I really want to go back to school. Okay, I'm really struggling, if I'm honest, at home. I'm finding it really difficult to get motivated and to find the energy to do everything that I need to do. Okay. So if you're feeling like that too, you are absolutely not alone in that. And I think it's very normal. As you can see, I am in pretty dire need of a haircut. It's not a great look. I've resisted the urge to take the kitchen scissors to my own hair. Okay. But I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. Okay. I also spent a bit too much time in the sun last week, so you can't really see it here actually, which is good, but I am quite sunburnt at the moment. It is really important that you go outside once a day. Okay, I know people are probably nagging you about this at home too, but it is really important to get fresh air. And if you can, if you're lucky enough to be close by somewhere that's natural and green and beautiful, it will do you all sorts of good just to spend half an hour outside amongst nature. It makes absolutely huge difference every day. I know it does for me. Okay, so first of all, what I want to say is to those of you that have been working really hard to keep on top of everything, well done. Okay, I have been seriously impressed by some of you. I'm also a little worried about some of you who are working so super duper hard. I do worry a little bit that you might be running yourself ragged a little bit. Okay, please remember, learning at home is very different to learning at school, right? It's very different sitting down and doing some work on your own compared to being in a classroom with 25 other people and me there to G you along and work together at points. Okay, so if you're finding this difficult, please be kind to yourself. Okay, you might want to look at chunking down work, doing work at different times. Okay, whatever you can do at this time is absolutely brilliant. Okay, so on that note, if you are finding it really tough, maybe you don't have a brilliant laptop at home or you don't have a quiet place you can go and do your work, please don't worry about it. Okay, whatever you can do would be absolutely amazing. But if you are limited because of what you have at home, or you are just finding it really tricky to get into the right state of mind, do what you can. Okay, and if I can do anything at all to help you, please email me. Right, lots of you have been emailing me, which has been lovely. But if there is anything I can do to help you, just let me know. Okay, so what we are going to do, we are moving on now from Jekyll and Hyde, and you did an absolutely amazing job with Jekyll and Hyde. I think actually out of all the classes I've ever taught it to, you got on the best with it, so well done. Okay, although we might not be at school, I want you to know that I have absolute confidence in all of you that you will be able to do an absolutely brilliant job with all of these poems that we need to look at. Okay, the poems that we're going to be covering come out of an anthology that are provided by the exam board. Okay, and some of you that that organised amongst you might have this at home. Okay, which is the revision guide for the poetry anthology. If you don't have this, please do not worry. Okay, if you do have this, it might be useful. I would say this is a really brilliant revision resource, but at the moment we are learning. Okay, so I do not want this to become your Bible, right? By all means, keep it next to you if you have it and refer to it, but please trust your brain. Don't over rely on this. Okay, so the collection of poems that we're looking at has been selected because they are all, generally speaking, connected to two main themes, okay? And those ideas, those themes, are power and conflict. Now, if you've had a look through some of the poems already, some of them it's quite obvious how they're connected to power and conflict. Others are a little bit more tricky. That's my job to help you make the connections, okay? So the first poem that we're going to look at is a poem called Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. Now, I did email out a link yesterday to a website where you can find this poem. I know as well, on OneNote, Mrs. Linley has uploaded loads and loads of resources about these poems, and I know some of you have already been having a look. For today, all you need is a copy of this poem. Now, I know it looks big, okay? Don't be put off. I have spaced this really wide on my computer so that I've got space to write all over it. It's actually only 14 lines long. right? So if you don't have a printer at home, or you've run out of ink or whatever, or you just prefer to, please can I ask that you go now to that link and just copy the poem. It's short. It'll be quite relaxing to do. Take your time, just copy it up so you've got a copy of it in front of you. If you've got your exercise book, brilliant. If not, just do it on some paper. Okay, so this is all you're going to need. Also grab pen, highlighter, gel pen, whatever you've got lying around, and we are going to have a look through this poem together. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do, yesterday I sent a YouTube link out to a reading of the poem, and if you've ever watched Breaking Bad, which I haven't actually, but if you have ever watched Breaking Bad, you might recognize the voice, okay, because that reading comes from the TV program Breaking Bad. This is a really famous poem, okay, and the reason it's really famous is because the ideas in it are still ideas that we think about and we sort of wrestle with today. It's a poem about how much power we have as human beings over other people, and the power that we think we have as human beings in the world in general, okay? Because as human beings, it's very easy to fall into the trap of feeling like we are the most powerful beings on this planet. And as current times show, that is not the case, okay? So this is a poem all about where we fit into the world as a whole, okay? So the screen is going to switch now to the visualizer, and hopefully you will still be able to hear my voice, okay? So Ozymandias, here we go.
Okay, Year 10. So hopefully in front of you, you've got one way or another a copy of this poem. Okay. What I'm going to do is I am going to talk you through it chronologically from top to bottom. Okay. And I'm going to pick out what I think are the most interesting parts about this poem. Now, it's really important that I emphasise this is what I think are the key ideas and the most interesting ideas in this poem. You may think slightly differently about some of the things that I pick out, and that's fine. If anything, that's actually a good thing, okay? Because I do want to encourage you to have the confidence to start thinking about your own interpretations and start thinking about whether there is more than one way of looking at different aspects of this poem, okay? When we get to the end of this video, this piece of paper might look quite busy. There might be quite a lot of notes around it. If there is, brilliant. And I will tell you at the end of the video how we will use this document to go forward and to move forward. And I don't want this document to freak you out once we've completed it. Okay, this is going to look very busy indeed because we're going to have tons and tons of ideas on here. Okay. So, before we get going, make sure you've got with you a highlighter or a coloured pencil or something, or a pencil or a different coloured pen, and a pen. You know my handwriting is not amazing. I'm going to try really hard to keep this clear, okay? But if you do need to pause the video or anything else, that's the beauty of YouTube. You can pause this and you can go over bits, replay bits if you need to. So make the most of that. Okay, so before we get going with the poem itself, the story behind this poem is actually, I think, a bit unusual. So it's written by a man called Percy Bysshe Shelley, okay, and he wrote this poem in 1817. Now you might recognise that name, you might recognise the name Shelley. Percy was actually married to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, okay, both of them were writers, and they wrote things that had sort of similar ideas, but they wrote very different styles. Okay, so in 1817 at Christmas time, Percy had his friends round for Christmas, and one of his friends was called Horace Smith. Okay, and there was a real interest at the time in exploration and discoveries in the ancient world, and Horace Smith and Percy Shelley sat down and they were talking about the discovery of a statue of a pharaoh in Egypt, okay, and that pharaoh was called Ramses II. Now you might have heard of him, you might not, but essentially Percy and Horace sat down and they were talking about these discoveries that were made by explorers in ancient Egypt, and this statue that was found was not a complete statue. It was a statue that had deteriorated. It had been broken down over the hundreds, thousands of years by nature. Okay, and Horace and Percy because they were those types of guys. They set themselves a challenge and they decided to have a little bit of fun and try and write poems inspired by this story of the explorer finding the statue of Ramses II. Now, Horace did write a poem. It wasn't very good. You can find it online, but it's largely been forgotten. This is perhaps, I would say, one of the most famous poems in English literature. Okay, the reason I sent you that video to listen to with the animation was because this poem did actually feature in Breaking Bad. That's why there is the audio file of Bryan Cranston reciting it, okay? Because this is a poem all about the power of human beings and how that power doesn't actually last, right? We might think we are all powerful. We might think that we are the great controllers of the universe, but actually nature always wins in the end, okay? So let's start from the top. The first thing that I want to point out to you about this poem is that in the first line, we are told by the speaker that they met a traveller from an antique land, okay? But what you will notice is that although it starts in first person, by the second line, we hear a different voice in this poem, okay? It is not the speaker at the start of the poem that's telling us this story. It's the traveller that the speaker has met, okay? So we are hearing this story, not just second hand, but we are hearing this story third hand, okay? So it is not an experience of the speaker, it's an experience of the traveller. So I'm just going to jot that down at the top. Why is that important? Well, if you think about it, if somebody tells you a story that somebody else has told to them, it makes it sound a bit more mythic. And by that I mean it makes it seem a bit less realistic. This is not something that the speaker themselves has experienced. It's something that's been experienced by somebody else and they are telling us about it. Okay? What's also important in this first line is that the speaker tells us that the traveller has been to an antique land. Okay, now that word antique's really important because to me it has connotations of something that is ancient. Okay, it's not specified how old it is. All we know is that it is an ancient place, and because of the word antique, it almost makes me think of relics as well. Now, a relic is something that's remains behind. It's proof of something that was there before. So this story that we are being told comes from a place that is a relic from the past. Okay, it's not from a place that we recognise today. And I think that's done on purpose. So, as we move on into the poem and we start hearing from the traveller himself, he tells us this story of exploring in the desert and coming across this statue that has broken down. Okay, so it's not a complete statue that's you would expect to see in a city today. It's a statue that's collapsed, parts of it have fallen off. Okay, it's the remains of a statue. Okay, so all that this traveller actually can describe to us are these two vast and trunkless legs of stone. Now, vast is to do with size. If something is vast, it means it's huge. Okay, it's impressive in size. Okay, and he's not talking about the whole statue here, he's just talking about the legs. Right, so this, you have to imagine this statue that's in the desert, the legs of it are absolutely massive. And trunkless, your trunk is the part of your body from your waist up, really. Okay, so, gosh, I'm going to have to draw you a picture. So in the desert, this is a comedy picture, as it always is. In the desert, we have this statue just of these legs. Okay, there's no body, there's no head. The legs are all that remain standing. Okay, so there's these two vast and trunkless legs of stone standing in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. Now, a visage or a visage is another word for a face. Okay, So alongside this statue, which is still standing, in the sand to the side, the head of the statue is there, but it's shattered. This is a terrible drawing. You should expect nothing less by now. Okay, so, oh, come on, visualizer. There we go. So the face is shattered. Okay, it's decayed. It's broken down. Okay, and it's half sunk. Okay, so it's almost like that this statue, the face of the statue, is being swallowed up by the sand in the desert. Okay, so that's really strong imagery, so I'm going to make a note of that. So we've got this imagery of the sand swallowing the face. Why is that important? Well, think about what that idea, what that image might represent. When we build statues, we build them, they're built to show the power or the influence of somebody that's very important. Okay, so this is somebody who was once important, but now their power has faded. Okay, and it's almost like nature is showing us how unimportant they are now, because nature is swallowing up parts of this statue. So here I'm just going to write nature showing how power fades over time. Okay, so travellers in the desert, there's the legs, there's the face, and on the face he describes the expression as a frown with a wrinkled lip. Okay, and then he goes on to say that the wrinkled lip suggests a sneer of cold command. Okay, so if you think about a statue of a person and on their face it's like they're sneering, you can hear it in my voice. When you sneer, it's like you turn your lip up at somebody in disgust. Okay, so this phrase here gives us information about how this statue, how this person, represented by the statue, Ozymandias, how he ruled. So he ruled his people very harshly, very strictly, okay, very coldly, right? Now, we are going to skip forward a little bit now. We are going to go to this section, okay, skip down. And the traveller tells us that this statue is standing on a pedestal. Now, I've drawn the pedestal here. The pedestal is just like the foundations, the base of the statue. Okay, so I'll write that here just so we're clear. So on the base of the statue, there are some words inscribed. Okay, and those words are, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Now, you could write a whole essay just about this line. So, underneath this statue, the ruler shown in the statue, Ozymandias, he declares himself. Okay, so that's a declarative. He's saying, I am the King of Kings. Now, those of you that do philosophy and ethics, have a little think. What might that remind you of? Okay, King of Kings, Shelley's put that in on purpose because that's what we call a biblical reference. It makes us think of figures from faith, from religion. It makes us think of somebody who is godlike. If you are the King of Kings, you are God. Okay, you might almost suggest that this tells us that Ozymandias almost sees himself as like a saviour of these people. Okay, now it's not anyone else saying that he's the King of Kings. He's saying it himself. So this tells us that as a ruler, he's quite arrogant. Okay, he really revels in this power and sees himself far and away as more important than the people he rules. And that's emphasised by the fact that this statue at one time was on a pedestal. Okay, so the statue would have stood above, looking over this civilization. It would have been surrounded by houses, buildings, the people that he ruled. Okay, so together, that combination of this statue, of this sneering, arrogant, cold leader looking down over this civilization, and underneath the statue he's written, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings." That tells us a lot, doesn't it, about what he was like as a king, as a pharaoh. Okay, and then underneath, where he declares himself to be the King of Kings, he says, "Look on my works." Okay, so in that bit, he's directing us to look at the civilization he's created. "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Okay, now despair is a funny choice of word. Despair implies that when we look at this place that Ozymandias is in charge of, we should almost feel afraid, right? Or in awe of his power, in awe of his influence. Okay. He wants us to feel so impressed that we're almost afraid. Now, this is really important when you consider it with the next line. Okay, so although this statue, this remnant of a statue, tells us that this was a man who considered himself to be the most important, the most powerful being in this civilization. Oh, apologies, I just need to get the door. Give me a second. Sorry guys, that doesn't happen in lessons, does it? Well, maybe it does. Let's just pretend that was a student host knocking on the door. Okay, so where was I? Right, so underneath this statue, we have this inscription on the pedestal that tells us that Ozymandias really sees himself as the most powerful, the most important, godlike figure who is ruling over these people. Okay, but the traveller tells us that next to this statue now, nothing beside remains. So every shred of evidence that there was once a whole civilization here has gone. The only thing that remains is this broken statue. Okay, so there's no other evidence. This is a rubbish pen. If you can hear a bell jingling, by the way, that's just my cat. It's not your ears. Hopefully he won't jump on the table. So there's no other evidence of there ever being a civilization. Okay, so this power that Ozymandias thought he had, okay, this godlike power has decayed, and there is no evidence of his influence anywhere apart from this statue. So when we have these side by side, the fact that Ozymandias says, "I am Ozymandias, look, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty in despair," that is ironic. Okay, it's ironic because his power has faded. It's not even faded. Faded's not strong enough. His power has evaporated. He's no longer all-powerful. He's no longer this incredible, important leader that he considers himself to be when he has the statue built. Okay, and just to emphasise that a bit more, the traveller tells us that all that remains round the decay of the colossal wreck, okay, so again we get those ideas of things being decaying or broken. The only thing that's around, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So if you imagine, I'm going to redraw my picture. This is like the desert, obviously. Here's the statue. All there are the legs. We've got part of a head here, looking mean, with a big crack down it. Okay, all there is around is sand. Okay, so this statue now is completely isolated. It's not at the centre of anything. It's in the centre of nothing, which is a complete opposite, isn't it, of how Ozymandias sees himself. He sees himself at the centre of the whole world, his whole world. He is the all-powerful, godlike figure in it. But now, this statue is at the centre of nothing. Ozymandias is at the centre of nothing. Okay, so his power has completely decayed and broken down over however many thousands of years have passed. Okay, last thing I want to pick out, and this is quite a little pernickety thing, but I think it's quite clever. When you get to this part of the poem, okay, I think the pace slows down. Listen. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Now, what you have going on here is something quite clever. Okay, you have these repeated vowel sounds, and they are long vowel sounds. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So those repeated long vowel sounds emphasize the isolation and the size of this desert. Okay, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So they emphasize the vastness of the desert, okay, and how isolated this statue is. Okay, so that's a quick whiz through in 20 minutes of what I think are some really, really key points of this poem. Okay, before we finish, I just want to tell you a little bit about the kind of poem this is, because poems can be categorised into different forms. Okay, and this poem is a sonnet. Now, you might have heard of sonnets before. Shakespeare wrote loads of sonnets. We've looked at sonnets before. Okay, sonnets usually have a very rigid and specific structure and rhyme scheme. This is different. Okay, this is a sonnet with an irregular rhyme scheme. So it's quite unusual for a sonnet. It's a sonnet that doesn't really follow the rules of other sonnets. Okay, now what you could say about this is, because there is an irregular rhyme scheme, because there is broken rhyme, that could reflect what's being said in this poem, the message of the poem. That could reflect the damage or the breakdown of the statue itself. Okay, so just like the structure of the statue is broken, so is the structure of this poem. Okay, so that is a very quick whiz through this poem. Do pause this video, rewind bits if you need to, okay, and try and get something that looks like this, okay, and keep it safe so it can go in your folder when we get back to school. Now, I know there is tons and tons on this page, okay, so what I would like you to do, once you have got this down, once you have followed this video, I want you to stop working and go and do something else. Walk the dog, do the washing up, watch an episode of Friends, do whatever you like, okay? But after you've done that, I want you then to think about the poem. I want you to try and think about it without it in front of you, right? Think about what you think Shelley is saying in this poem, okay? And once you've done that, I have emailed round to you a sheet on Word that's called Golden Nuggets. Now, I know it's a silly title, but what that sheet is for, check your email, it's there. What that sheet is for you to record what you think are the 3 most interesting or most important ideas in this poem. Okay, so it could be, I don't know, this word antique and what it tells us, what the connotations are, what it tells us about Ozymandias' power. It could be this section at the end where we get these repeated long vowel sounds and how that emphasises the vastness of the desert, okay? It could be the fact that it's a sonnet with an irregular rhyme scheme. It could be the imagery. It could be anything, okay? But on that sheet, I want you to record, slim it down to just three key ideas, okay? And you are going to keep that sheet going a bit like a log of what you think are the most important parts of all these poems we've looked at together, okay? So there you have it, guys. Ozymandias in 23 minutes.